Yo, 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 what's up, fellas? What's going on?
Hello, mates.
It's the International Comics Collective live. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Dave, Chris, what's up, fellas? Thanks for joining us today. What's going on?
As always, a pleasure. Hope you guys are all fine out there.
Yeah, well, definitely, yo. Much love to everybody, and a rest in peace to a legend that we've lost recently. Mm-hmm. Chris has been writing, amazing columns about the history of DC, and lately has been touching upon the legend that passed away, and Mr. Denny O'Neil. May rest in peace. Our condolences to the family during this time. And well, today, why not? It's a time to talk about this legend and his contributions to comics in the first half, and then second, on our 101 series with Dave, editing, and obviously O'Neil's heavy influence in the editing. I mean, he was a very humble dude. He didn't even want to be listed as an editor. I mean, reading in this history. So he was an amazing creator. So, guys, I'll leave the floor to the man of the hour over here that been writing some amazing articles for Comic Crusaders. Mr. Buse, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Al. What a wonderful introduction. Yes, we lost one of the greats in comic books on Friday, Mr. Denny O'Neil, and I think who is a Batman fan out there, they will associate him with the amazing work he did with Neil Adams in the 70s. Some might remember him from being the editor on Death in the Family, the seminal story where they killed off the second Robin. But Denny O'Neil had a very, very long and stellar career in comics as a writer and as an editor. And when you think about the best writers in comic books ever, Stanley comes up maybe, Alan Moore will come up, some other guys will come up, but very often Denny O'Neil will be forgotten. And we are today here to remember a legend, a true legend to the industry, and a man who made a huge impact. And what Denny O'Neil did in the late 60s and early 70s was groundbreaking for its time. And it was quite an amazing piece of work he put in. And to give you a little bit rundown how he started, where he came about, Denny O'Neil was originally working as a journalist, but he thought comic is a nice thing he can also do. And he went to Marvel and talked to Stan Lee, and Stan Lee hired him. And Stan Lee put him on some Western titles. And somehow the culture at Marvel, working with Stan, didn't fit to what Denny wanted or who Denny was. He was really not very happy at Marvel. And either he was fired or Stan said, well, basically, this is not working out. Denny went over to Carlton Comics. And
but before you continue, let me interrupt. But in that early life of O'Neil in Marvel, apparently it was, Roy Thomas was there. He had left DC, went to work for Marvel at the time, and he suggested that O'Neil take a writer's test. And apparently O'Neil didn't even take it seriously. He's like, well, I just did this, instead of me doing a crossword puzzle, he did it as a joke. He never considered doing comics, which is very funny.
Yeah, but then he went. There's also a wonderful story about his inability to fit in at Marvel, because at one point in time, the story goes that Roy Thomas said, well, basically, I made some dope cookies. And you go and give them. You're the new guy. You go and give them to Stan, and let's see what happens. And then he really felt very shitty about it, and he never gave them to Stan. So somehow he and even though he worked well with Roy, somehow it didn't gel for him. Then he went over to Charlton Comics, and Dick Giorgiano was the editor of Charlton at that time, and he was the man, and he was very interesting because he had all these kinds of connections in the industry. He was a young up-and-comer editor, and he was the Karen Berger of the late 60s, if you will. He brought on all this amazing talent, and that was a time when there was a lot of turmoil at DC. You remember all these checkered bordered covers and they had all kinds of things. They were trying a lot of things because they were slowly losing ground to Marvel. Marvel was not in the top 10 yet at that time. We're talking
not
about
at
60.
All.
But they were creeping up, and they had guys like Bob Haney telling Carmine Infantino, he was the executive director at that time, or the executive editor at that time. Oh, these guys are kicking our ass. We need fresh blood in here. And the old guys are not cutting it anymore. And Haney was 20 years younger than guys like Julius Schwartz. And Carmine Infantino went to Dick Giordano, who was on the move, and said, well, what do you need to come over and bring some of your guys? And they said, well, you can make me an editor. And Dick Giordano came over to DC, and he brought Denny O'Neil along.
And wait, I want to say something. While he was at Charlton, he took a pen name or a pseudonym, if you will, of Sergius O'Shaughnessy. SOS. Was he asking for help?
Yeah, that's amazing. Get me off here. That's so small. But the cool thing that happened was they didn't know what to do with Denny O'Neil. And he was really the new kid on the block, also at DC. And Carmine Infantino said, well, basically, show you around. Let's see what's going on. At the same time, Neil Adams was trying to break into DC Comics. And Neil Adams, because Neil Adams is widely associated with Denny O'Neil, and he had these seminar rounds of Green Lantern and Batman. I mentioned Neil Adams, and then there's a wonderful story where Neil Adams went to Julius Schwartz and said, well, basically, I'm Denny O'Neil. I want to draw Batman. And Julius Schwartz laughed him out of the room. And then he went over to Maury Baltinoff, because Maury Baltinoff was editing The Brave and the Bold. And Neil Adams said, well, basically, there's Batman also. Let me do Batman here in The Brave and the Bold. And he said, yeah, sure, you can do Jerry Lewis comic. We have a Jerry Lewis comic. And so Neil Adams started on the Jerry Lewis comic at DC. And Denny O'Neil, in the meantime, he was hanging around the offices, and Jack Miller, who was responsible for all the romance books, because a lot of people don't know this, or, well, it's really surprising when you come about this fact, was really selling was romance books at the late 60s. It began in the 50s when Kirby and Joe Simon created the genre of romance books, and they were still selling gangbusters with romance books. And Jack Miller was the editor on these romance books. And wouldn't you know, Wonder Woman, being a female character, she was under Jack Miller's purview because she was a romance character, more or less. Yeah. And Jack Miller invited Denny O'Neil to come in and say, well, Wonder Woman is selling like nothing. What can we do? And we all, or most comic fans, know what happened next. We got the mod Wonder Woman.
That Diana Prince stories, right?
Exactly. Not a stellar writing comics, but it goes to show what Denny O'Neil was going for. He was trying to shake up.
I like those. I like those.
Yeah,
Mike Sikowski's artwork. Yeah. Plus, there's great. There was a couple of great Jeff Jones covers.
But feminists didn't appreciate it too much at the time.
Well, she was depowered. Like basically, I don't think they. While that would have been acceptable on any other book, the fact that it was the most prominent female book at the time, it wasn't taken kindly to. But
no, it got him into trouble. Got him into trouble with Gloria Steinem, actually, because she didn't take to this too kindly. That was very interesting. That's very crazy. But nevertheless, when this happened, Denny O'Neil got into trouble with Julius Schwartz, because Wonder Woman became completely unusable for the Justice League, and she was the only female character on the Justice League. So what Denny O'Neil did was he incorporated Black Canary from Earth 2. There's the story where her husband dies, and there's the sort of story that very much parallels the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, where basically Earth 2 gets wiped out by a big villain, Aquarius, and her husband is the one who makes the ultimate sacrifice. And so Black Canary comes over to Earth 2 because she said, oh, my husband is dead, so there's nothing keeping me anymore. And continuity be damned, because on Earth 2, all the characters were older, but Black Canary was apparently very young. And she came over, and what Denny O'Neil did, he replaced Gardner Fox on Justice League, which was a big deal, because Gardner Fox had kicked off Justice League, and he was the old guard, and Denny O'Neil came in much, much younger, 30 years younger, and he wanted to shake things up, and he wanted to bring this Marvel spirit to DC Comics, because that was basically the brief he got. He said, well, we need to make these characters more appealing, more interesting. And you see what he started on Justice League, he started to bring in these bigger themes, pollution and overpopulation, all these kinds of things. He began doing that in Justice League, but it was the old idea, oh, the aliens are doing it, or some evil organization is doing this. But then, finally, Neil Adams arrived in full at DC Comics, and we got the pairing of Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil on Green Lantern. And we know the famous story when this kicked off in Green Lantern 76, when we have Green Arrow, who's now a socialist, more or less. He lost his fortune. That happened in Justice League. He got his money taken away from him. He's now the voice of the left, and Green Lantern is more or less the man. He's the ultra conservative cop character.
Chris,
and they clash.
Before you continue there, just to tell you, I had that issue in my hands that I bought in Brooklyn 10 years ago for $10.
Wow, amazing! In what condition?
I would say in a very good. You know,
nice.
I let it go, obviously, but yeah, I had that in my hands. Not just that issue, but the issue with Speedy and all of that. I had several issues from that historic run that I no longer have. So that's why when I read your articles, I mean, they're fantastic, but also breaks my heart. Oh, that was great stuff, man.
I bought them when they were the original cover price.
Oh, wow, bro.
Yeah.
Wow. There he goes, folks. Dave has dated himself.
You still have those issues, Dave?
No. Long time ago.
Wow. Yeah, but this run was very seminal in many respects because all of a sudden it was no longer the aliens doing this. We had this in the first part of the run, but they were really beginning to do very subversive stuff. Because if you remember this one cover of Green Lantern, you see a picture of a guy there, a corporate guy. Denny O'Neil took a picture of a guy, and he was one of the executives doing marketing and PR for the Kinney Corporation. The Kinney Corporation had bought DC Comics at that time, and the Kinney Corporation became Warner Brothers, Warner Communications, because they bought Warner as well, because the movie studio was pretty run down. And this was a story how a cleaning company, building facility management company, bought DC Comics, Mad, and Warner Brothers, and made Warner Communication. That was Steve Ross doing this. And it was quite an amazing story in itself. And Denny O'Neil Neil Adams was using this picture of this guy and he was the bad guy in the story, more or less. The guy who was doing PR for Warner Brothers. Nobody would do this today. That was really subversive what they were doing. And they were also putting out a story where they had Spiro T. Agnew, the vice president at the time, as the bad guy, more or less. But he was a cook. He was not the vice president. Amazing stuff. They were really doing very subversive stuff. And this run more or less ended when the journey of Hal Jordan ended. He became the character of the left. There's the big scene at the end of the run where he basically, after they kill off one of the nice hippies, he turns to Carol Ferris and says, well, all your airplanes are more or less polluting. The fuel you're using now is polluting the nature. And here's me answering to this, and he destroyed an airplane. And one of the guys says, oh, you just destroyed an airplane for $9 million. And he said, send me a bill. And that was more or less his turn to the left.
So
and at the same,
the Green Lanterns paying that bill, though?
No. Oh, he has secret identity. Nobody knows who he is. Oh no, he revealed the secret identity to Carol. So basically, Carol needed to stay put on that one.
But I was had to go to Owa and sue, man. Come on now.
But
I'm sure Carol's still trying to get the insurance company to pay up.
Probably. Insured against mad superheroes. But really at the same time, Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil who also worked on Batman, and we all remember the Ra's al Ghul story, and that is some amazing stuff that's going on there, because not only was Denny O'Neil breaking the superheroes, like what he also did with Superman. When Superman lost half of his power, he wanted to depower Superman. He changed Green Lantern. He worked on Challenges of the Unknown, where we replaced the leader of the Challenges of the Unknown with a woman at the end of the 60s. That was really unheard of. And but we also got this very interesting run on Batman, where Batman became the dark, moody Avenger again, and he became this sort of, Grant Morrison calls him the hairy chest sex god, and that's basically what he was. It was sort of the Dark Knight meets James Bond, and we had this espionage, this world traveling. We had Tala al Ghul at this time, and it was also the time when terrorism began to take hold, and airplane abductions became a thing. And Denny O'Neil was working this all into Batman. And Batman really became the character we know today. Of course, he was also very dark in the 30s when he originally started, before he had Robin. But he was this, after that, he was this more this funny go-around character. And Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams took him back to these dark roots, and they made him the Batman we know today. And that's really, I think, one of the most lasting impressions we have of Denny O'Neil, that he and Neil Adams rebuilt the character Batman from the ground up. And that's quite an amazing achievement. And the interesting thing is, and then I want to close here and give the floor to Dave, is that Denny O'Neil later went back to Marvel, and then he went back to DC. And what are the chances? He edited The Dark Knight Returns. Isn't that an amazing story? And he also edited Death in the Family, which is quite amazing. Dave?
Yep.
Well, it's, I mean, you missed out a little bit on, like, his, because I think the first time Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams worked together wasn't that X-Men.
No, that was in between. That was right in the time they only worked on one issue together. And that was because Roy Thomas phoned him up and said, "Can you help me out?" That was in the middle of the Green Lantern run.
Right.
Because what happened was that Denny was still holding the contact with Roy in the hopes that they would call him up if the scene didn't work out.
Bless you.
And so, bless you.
So bless you, they said.
So basically, the idea was if DC wouldn't work out, he would still have it in with Roy, because then he was banking on that Roy would take over the company. And Roy was scripting the X-Men with Neil Adams, and then there was the one issue where he couldn't meet the deadline. And that's quite an interesting story, because it's interesting to compare, and I did this in my column, this issue where Professor X saves Earth from an alien invasion just with his mind, versus a story on Green Lantern. Denny O'Neil wrote before he worked with Neil Adams on Green Lantern, but Mike Sekowsky did the artwork. And if you go back to this one issue, that might be Mike Sekowsky's best artwork, because Hector Hammond is the villain there. And what Hector Hammond does to Green Lantern is much more creepy and scary with mind powers than what Professor X does when he saves the world. It's quite interesting how much more invested Denny O'Neil was with the DC characters than with the Marvel characters at that time.
Oh, definitely. And just to touch upon what you said, Dave, this is, it wasn't the first, but it was one of the earliest collaborations between O'Neil and him. And that basically revived the Professor X character in Marvel. That's what they did.
He was dead. He was dead.
Yeah, because that was the issue where, because it was like the first time that over the years we saw many times Professor Xavier betray the X-Men. He lied to the X-Men. And this was like the first big one. This is like, hey, he made them believe that he was dead all this time.
Yeah, but you know who came up with the return? Neil Adams, at least he claims.
Well, it was all, I'm sure it was all a bit sort of like Marvel method back then, where it was like, hey, what should we do in this issue? Rather than today is where we see sort of like issues planned out years and ahead.
Yeah, we bring Professor X back from the dead.
Because I think that might have been the issue before the last but one issue before the book just switched to reprints.
So the issue they came on, so we know, it's X-Men number 65 is when that happened.
Exactly.
So and they went to reprints after.
Yeah.
No, they have one more issue with art by Sal Buscema, which is very, very good Sal Buscema art, where they meet the Hulk.
But isn't it inked by Tom Palmer? So there was a bit of connectivity with it. There was a slight kept the style. Tom
Palmer definitely inked the Don Heck issue that came in between, and that really looks like a Neil Adams issue.
Oh, it does. It looks beautiful.
It's a very good issue. That was introduced Sunfire.
Wow, Sunfire.
But as you say, I mean, like, Denny kind of, not only did he sort of shepherd the way that Batman continued for years, for decades almost, but he'd worked with Frank Miller over at Marvel, and then brought him over to DC. So it was, I dare say, Denny has probably got a big part to play. There's probably a big reason why he was the editor on Batman.
No, huge.
Dark Knight.
And Frank Miller has acknowledged this many times, where he said, well, basically, he wanted to come in as a writer because he was Don McGregor was writing the book, if I recall correctly, And he had some ideas. And then he said, well, basically, we can get you on as a writer, but we need to shape you. And he trained him. And he gave him stories to read and stories on books on story writing. And he really gave Frank Miller the tools to become the writer he is today.
Not just the writer, but the artist as well.
Yeah.
Because he allowed him to do both the writing and the art. Have to remove the other creator just to give Frank that access. I mean, he was truly a very early believer in Miller, man.
Absolutely.
Well, that's something that both companies always tended to shy away from, and it's very rare that they ever allowed the same creative team to write and draw. Like so people like Walt Simonson and John Byrne are very much in a minority. Like Frank Miller, you know, very, very few people got to write and draw their own books.
Because it raises the problem with copyright. Because if you do everything, why do you not own the character, or at least the stories or characters you create in the world of the characters? And if you divide the labor, then, well, who did what? It's all owned by Marvel.
Becomes a trouble.
Well, it was all, I mean, technically, as far as the company is concerned, they all thought it was owned by them anyway. But it's also editors wanting control, publishers wanting control. So, like, if you know because a lot of editors, even still to today, have become always stay that middleman between the writer and the artist, so that they can kind of. They're always overseeing like the way these characters are played out, who does what. They don't want the writer and artist making a decision without consulting editorial, so they kind of cock block them a lot, really.
You mean chicken block?
Oh yes, chicken block.
Is that how we say it nowadays?
Yeah, I don't want to offend people because lately everybody got offended. You know what I mean? You know, but there is a cool tidbit with everything that he's done. There was something I never knew about Denny O'Neil. All right,
what's that?
I'm a big Transformers fan. I love Transformers.
Oh yeah.
I never knew up until this very day today that the name Optimus Prime came out of Denny O'Neil's mouth.
Here you go.
Wow. Thank you, Denny. I mean, what's Optimus and Megatron, boy, amongst my favorite comic characters of all time.
Well,
amazing.
I mean, but don't forget, like pretty much Marvel put together everything most of what we know as Transformers. Like when that line, like that wasn't, they created everything that went behind the comic.
Yes, but the names, I mean, Optimus is an iconic name that, come on, man. When you hear Optimus Prime, your chest wants to go up. That's Optimus, kiddo.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you, Denny. I mean, but he did so many other things. I mean, he introduced Yoriko Oyama, right? And what was it, Daredevil, which later turned into become Lady Deathstrike. He killed off the original Batwoman. He worked on Superman versus Muhammad Ali. I mean, he even well, we're gonna get into that later when he was an editor for Superman with Chris Swan and all that. I mean, this dude was just all over the place.
He wrote it as well. He was the one who wrote the issues.
Yep.
Yeah, when it first became.
And he was the one who brought. Kryptonite went away, and he brought Kent over to be the news anchor, which lasted for a long time, actually.
Yeah, but his run did it? It was only something like about 4 to 6 issues.
No, like 10 issues, and we read them recently, and they are not really that good, actually.
It wasn't that long. Yeah.
And it was the Sandman storyline where there was this explosion when Kryptonite went away, and there was the Sandman character who siphoned away Superman's power, because the idea was basically Superman was too powerful. What kind of stories can you tell with him? And if you always have to rely on Kryptonite as his own weakness, that's getting very boring very fast. And that was his idea to bring a new Superman to the table, but it was not very well received, because not everything he was doing, because he was so busy shaking up things. And we complain these days a lot about creators who shake up things. But if you go back to the history of comics, Steranko completely redesigned Nick Fury. Nick Fury was this gruff Second World War character. And
he went from Sergeant Fury to Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he became
totally different look.
Yeah, but I think that completely redesigned him.
Oh yeah, but I think that was an instance where it was, you know, you take a lesser known character and you make something more of him. And I think that's what Jim Steranko did with Nick Fury.
So you want to talk about improving? So, you know, Denny O'Neil is responsible for reviving Two-Face and Joker in DC. I mean, he brought back the homicidal, nutty ass Joker that everybody loves today, apparently.
Yeah, but he also, I mean, he also created Ra's al Ghul, which
and Talia.
Yeah, so and those, I mean, you know, when you look at,
and even Damien to an extent, because in the
that came out of
in the hardcover they introduced Damien in the test tube, which they try to say that test tube is the first appearance of Damien, you know.
Right. Yeah, Michael Barbel. That all led to this. And then what was so interesting is that they let him do this kind of things, because it was a lot of things came together. DC was losing ground, and also we saw at that time the loosening up of the comics code. So a lot of things came together, because you mentioned the homicidal Joker. The homicidal Joker was not possible because of the restrictions of the comic code. Yeah. But at the end of the 60s, and there was the story Stan Lee likes to talk, that he brought about these changes when he put out the Spider-Man issues with the drug story, and that was before the Green Lantern story, and Martin Goodman was allowed him to put them out without the comics code, because the comic code wouldn't let him do any drugs. And he said, well, basically I've been asked by this organization from the government, why wouldn't we put out a Spider-Man story as an anti-drug message? And the comics code said, no, we can't use drugs. We said, it's an anti-drug message. And they said, no, it's not possible. And then Stan Lee went to Martin Goodman, and Martin Goodman said, I don't give a shit. So he basically said, put them out. I don't care. Put them out. I don't care.
Yeah. A man with balls, bro.
And this changed the comics code, because the comics code, and that's the reason why we got all the horror characters. We got Dracula and the Werewolf at Night, because the comics code was massively overhauled at the end of the 60s, early 70s. And this opened the door for this darker Batman as well. And a lot of things came together which worked in favor of Denny O'Neil. And also we got this with The Dark Knight Returns, because Janet Kahn became the new publisher of DC Comics after Carmine Infantino got fired, because DC was not showing the improvement they had hoped they would. And basically she had a completely different approach. Her idea was basically to say, let's get the young talent on board, similar to what Infantino did, but let's play them, let them have all the freedoms they want, because there's this story Frank Miller likes to tell, when Janet Kahn invited him for dinner together with Dick Giordano, and said, well, basically, Frank, what would it take for you to come over to DC? What do you really want? And Miller only said one word, and that's freedom. And that's what she gave him, and was a smart decision. It's and completely changed. And if you look at Ronin, that is a crazy book.
Oh, it is. Comics, I have one or two of those issues. I want to finish that run.
Wow, it's an amazing run.
Remember, I mean, it was when The Dark Knight was originally produced, it was very much considered an Elseworld story.
Yes, it was. You're absolutely right.
And it was only later on that people, like, editorially, they tried to set things up in it,
that it's canon
universe, that it is kind of the future. This is the future of Batman, which I don't think they need to do it. But
what's crazy is my first introduction to that particular storyline was through a friend of mine that had the leather-bound edition. I don't know if you guys ever seen the leather-bound edition of The Dark Knight. It's a beautiful book for a collection. But he was the one. He said, "Oh, look at this." I said, "What is this, the Bible? What are you giving me?" I'm like, "No. Look at it." I'm looking, I'm like, wow. I mean, it really was, for me at least, the comic Bible of Batman through Frank Miller and the future, or the possible future as Elseworlds, as you said. Beautiful book, man.
And he also did Batman Year One, where he wrote it, and David Mazzucchelli did the art. Amazing. I think I like the Batman Year One a little bit better than The Dark Knight Returns, because it's not as nihilistic. It's a little bit more positive, but it's an amazing run.
Yeah, and let's not just talk about his DC work, because remember, he also, this dude was bouncing around between Marvel, DC, Charlton, going back and forth between them. And then in the 80s, he went back to Marvel, right?
Mm-hmm.
He did two issues of Amazing Spider-Man, drawn by Frank Miller. He
Mm-hmm.
did a team up with Doctor Strange, meaning the Punisher. He worked with Romita and introduced Madam Web, which is getting her own movie, apparently through Sony. And Iron Man, he introduced Obadiah Stane, the Iron Mongor. He the one that turned Jim Rhodes into Iron Man and created the Silver Centurion armor. I mean, dude, Denny O'Neil. I mean, where were these ideas coming from? I know I asked you this before the podcast or the vidcast, Dave, if we ever worked with him. You said no, but you did get to meet him. You said, correct?
Yeah, I met him up at DC. I was often went and whenever I would go to New York, I would go up to Marvel and I'd go up to DC, and you know, it's you've invariably at that you would get to meet everybody eventually. But I don't think that Denny O'Neil reminds me his legacy is very much to me Archie Goodwin's. Great writers, great storytellers, great editors,
and people that move the needle too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but they both understood story. You know, in fact, I would with Archie Goodwin, when you think about his output for say Warren alone, where but it was all those short stories, and you know, when you think about it, it's coming up every month, coming up with several whole baked short stories. You had to tell beginning, middle, and end, bang.
How did these guys stay married?
Well, actually, if you look at Denny O'Neil admitted that for a time back when he first kind of broke big, and he was actually being stopped on the street sometimes. His marriage did suffer a little bit, you know, and but I think that his work, you know, even weak Neil Adams
is still good.
Sorry, weak, but Denny O'Neil is still you're still going to get a solid story. You're still going to get an entertaining read.
You're going to get something real good, man.
And he was a risk taker, and we mentioned the Death in the Family storyline where Robin gets killed, the second Robin gets killed, and he initiated that because basically they didn't know what to do with his character anymore. And what can you do? You need to shake it up and bring real trauma to Batman. And he loses his second Robin. An amazing storyline. Daring for its time. I mean, absolutely daring. If you look, that was the 80s still.
But it's funny because Chris and myself talked yesterday, and one of the things we talked about, what we covered was certain deaths that, there's very few deaths in comics ever stay dead. Characters who die stay dead. And, you know, Jason Todd's another example of, you know, I've got to bring him back.
Somehow,
Yeah. So
but it's the interesting thing is also that we talked about the perception of the general public and the media of these comic book characters. And there's this wonderful story Denny O'Neil told. He was in a diner and he had a jacket on and he had a Batman button on his lapel. And the guy began to come and said, "Oh, you're the Batman fan." He said, "Well, I'm the editor of Batman." And the guy shouted across the room, "That's the guy who killed Robin!" Because everybody thought the original Robin had died. Because people were not following comics, and they only heard, "Oh, DC's killing of Robin." They had the idea of this cute kid who was also on the Batman TV show, where he was not that cute, but he was part of the Batman '66 TV show. And they kill Robin, but this is not how comics work.
They don't understand. They didn't kill Dick Rick.
Nobody stays dead, basically. Not even Jason Todd.
Well, all those people that thought genuinely thought that Superman was dead, they. You know, they just thought that was it. The end of they all went out and bought that issue of Superman because they thought this is the last.
That's it.
Ever Superman comic.
Yeah, I wish Death would keep. I think the one that lasted the longest, at least for me, was the Death of Barry Allen from Crisis on Infinite Earths, and the only other time we saw him was when Hal became the Spectre in that 6-issue miniseries. I forget the name. And then we didn't see Barry again up until Jeff Johns decided so it's time to bring him back.
Wasn't Supergirl a longer death by the time, because
Oh, well, yeah, the original also, yeah, that's lasted. But I think even she came back before Barry did in terms of how Michael Turner introduced her in the DC books.
Yeah, but I think the longest death would have been Bucky, wouldn't it?
Oh,
you know what, Bucky for sure,
yeah.
Bucky for sure. Winter Soldier, they still brought his ass back. You know what I mean? And you see the stuff they're pushing on that. You know, whatever. There is another
basic job.
Yeah, there was another cool little thing that I had found out about him. Damn it! Now I forgot. Oh, Azrael. We wouldn't have Azrael without him either.
Yeah.
Yep.
Him and Joe Q, man, introduced Azrael, the Sword of Azrael, back in '92. He was also, he also was responsible for the Armageddon 2001 that turned out beloved Captain Atom into a villain. You know what I mean? Let's see. He introduced, what was it, Hydro Man?
Wow.
Well, not everything's good.
Not everything's
gold, right?
There was another character though that I appreciated because I'm a big martial arts fan. He introduced Richard Dragon initially in a series of novels, and he brought that into DC. So he converted, one of his OG creations from novelization into a comic book, which is pretty cool. You know what I mean?
Very cool.
This man was so ahead of his time. He was a forward thinker. I mean, socially, you guys had brought up that the Green Arrow, Green Lantern run. If you look back at those issues, those were those few comics that you would see New York as it really was, if you will. Full of color and diversity.
Yeah.
There was the drugs, and there was that famous speech where where the black man is talking to Green Cow, and he's like, "What are you doing for us?" You know what I mean? It was deep. He was ahead of his time. He was a pioneer in trying to bring that social stuff to the forefront with Neil Adams. So I want to thank them for doing that. But we didn't. We as colored folks didn't have that much of a look in books back then. You know what I mean? We weren't even part of the background. But he introduced that feeling, like Kirby. Kirby understood that too.
Yeah.
But he also did John Stewart. He introduced the Black Lantern.
And dude, by those books that I bought, I had that damn book in my hands too for a minute. That my whole family almost shitted on my deal because I'm here trying to act cool, and my brothers knew what it was. I'm like, shut the hell up, guys! Don't mess this up for me. I bought the key runs. I spent less than $70 to get key issues, man. Let me tell you.
And that's a great issue. That's very well written. I've just
absolutely, bro. Absolutely,
amazing story actually.
But I think that if you look at what Denny O'Neil did with just a couple of issues of Green Lantern, Green Arrow, I think that the effect of those is just as important as, say, when Alan Moore did Marvel Man.
Yes, I agree.
Marvel Man was, the idea it was a soul that, like, there's just 2 or 3 of these superhero beings in that one world. And so everything was produced sort of set in a very real world, like between Alan Moore's writing and Gary Leach's art. It was clearly set in a very realistic world. But that was kind of done already, if you like, by Denny and Neil, by bringing in sort of race relations, the whole hippie movement,
feminism.
Feminism. I mean, they, dealing with the poor in the Midwest. They tackled a lot in those few issues,
but the interesting thing is also that we are very focused on, and rightfully so, on the Neil Adams run. But Denny O'Neil stayed on Green Lantern for many years. This is also part of my next column, because when Green Lantern was cancelled, Green Lantern became a backup strip in The Flash, and Denny O'Neil also wrote those stories. And there you see early out of Mike Grell. And then they brought back Green Lantern in '76 with Mike Grell doing the artwork. And that is also a great one. It's a run I fondly remember from my childhood. And that was really also still continuing what they were doing. They were talking about corporate greed. They were talking about corrupt politicians. They were still doing this in the '70s. And that was the time after Watergate. That was the time when Carter said, well, we have a crisis of confidence. And here was Mike Grell and Denny O'Neil talking about corrupt politicians, businessmen taking over America, all that sort of stuff in '76.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we had a young O'Neil and Adams today with this current climate? Oh my God, these comic books would be insane right now. I mean, the CG community, this for you, would be going upwards.
And how can you say? I mean, how can you honestly say, "Oh, don't bring politics into comic books"? The comic books have always been
part of it.
They've always been political. And
maybe not. You know what it is, Chris and Dave. Honestly, that people didn't want to talk about the politics in the comic books, but social media has brought that very forward, and that's what it is. You know what I mean?
That's
to be honest, they have always. I mean, look at Squadron Supreme run from Marvel back in the day. Highly political.
Absolutely.
What a great run.
Absolutely. Or if you think about the I.C.C. comics in the 50s, I mean, the feature stories with L. Feldstein and Wally Wood. I mean, they tackled anti-Semitism, they tackled racism, they tackled rape, all these kinds of subjects.
All got touched upon.
Well, don't forget, you know, when Kirby and Lee did X-Men, that was basically tackling anti-Semitism and racism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But in a way that, like, maybe, you know, it's interesting that I wonder if at any point either of them had actually thought as far ahead at that point to actually thought about including a black character in the X-Men back then, or, you know, because when you think about it, it took until Black Panther really to be the first real major character in the, well, at least in the Marvel universe, outside of you know, S.H.I.E.L.D. and Sergeant Fury.
Absolutely. As a main character, sure, that was the first.
It's crazy, man. We're such a big market to these, but we weren't getting representations of ourselves, you know. And they were very few and far in between, if you will. You know?
Yeah, and so you talk about, you know, you talk about sort of realism in comics, but it's, you know, it's a very
slippery slope, but
it is,
but one that has to be touched upon at times. Because and listen, I know we want to read comics as escapism. You know, what is escapism? You know, you want to get away from the real world, but sometimes, man, we can't escape from that real world because there's some real issues out there, and maybe some people could better understand it through the use of their favorite characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, just understand.
But if you want escapism, if you go back to the founding days of Image Comics, and if you look at those early stories that came from Jimmy Lee, that came from
nothing but fun, bro.
That is escapism in its
purest form.
Yeah, but
exactly
the splash pages. But what do you remember from the stories? You remember nothing from the stories.
Nothing. Only
Todd McFarlane was trying to break new ground as far as the stories were concerned, because he was really going against Marvel, and he was saying, here's the villain, and Spawn's going to kill the villain, because that's nothing Marvel.
Spawn is a minority character.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And that's been 300 issues strong. I mean, show me another minority character that's been 300 issues strong.
Yeah.
But if you look at the works of Rob Liefeld, what do we remember from those stories? We remember how cool they were, but this is really coming so purely entertaining. They have a place, but that's not the kind of books I want to read all the time.
No, especially with those bad feet, man. They had a lot of bunions, these guys.
Poor Rob.
I would actually say, like, to me, my favorite writer out of when it came to the Image books, the book that I probably got the most satisfaction out of was Savage Dragon.
Oh, Eric Larson, that's a man. Because great guy, very funny.
Yeah, I think of all of them, at least the original Image creators, I think Eric was the guy who could write and draw. Like, you know.
And he continues to this day doing, taking that double duty. When I met him at Boston Con, I wanted to thank him for his Twitter feed because it's hysterical at times. He's like another version. He's the male version of a Gale, when it goes to talking, very loudly about comics. So thank you, Eric. And he's done a great work, and he has such a great spirit. When I met him, man. I don't know, have you guys ever met Eric?
Yeah. No, I mean, I wouldn't have got my first book at Image without Eric. So
whoa, shout out, thank you, Eric. Shout out, Mr. Larson, bro. But the continued success of Savage Dragon continues too. I mean, everybody's talking about Spawn, but Savage Dragon is still running.
Yeah.
And he and Jim Valentino were responsible for getting the the new image afloat, where they brought in all these new independent voices.
The Kirkmans and everybody, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. This is awesome, man. I mean, but let's get back to the main topic with Denny, because Denny was the man. We're gonna get into our editing 101 because he, as amazing a creator as Dennis O'Neil was, he was also a very effective editor. And as mentioned earlier, he has stated that he didn't even want to get credit as an editor, so not to take away from the creative team. So, guys, what we're gonna do right now is take a short commercial break, all right? And then tune in and get into our second half. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
All right, brother. So let's go ahead and do this. Guys, we're going to a commercial break. I want you to check out our very own Comic Crusaders Lance Lucero's trailer for Bob. Check this out, man. You guys are going to love it. And there you go, folks. That was an awesome little preview of Bob Non-Union Psychic Number 0 by Lance Lucero from Warehouse 9 Productions. He's a
Wonderful.
Yeah, wasn't it dope, man? Lance, shout out, Lance Lucero. He's also an award-winning independent filmmaker. So make sure to check him out on Vimeo for Warehouse 9 Productions and check out his award-winning films and previews and trailers and whatnot. And go visit next Independent Film Festival and check out what he's doing because he's the man. That's just
wonderful.
Yeah,
shout out.
Look good. Look great.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah, man. Listen, and also, guys, this is what I want everybody to know. Any of you independent creators, what we just did, I want to do this for all of you. So if you have a commercial that we like to play as we segment in between our show, send it on over to comiccrusaders@gmail.com. Again, comiccrusaders with an S at gmail.com. And maybe in our next show, we'll go ahead and play it. I will say this. If you're CG, I don't want to hear it. And I'm just got to say it publicly just because I don't get support from you guys in a positive fashion. So therefore, I can support that in a positive fashion. Change your ways and I'll change mine. You feel me? And now with that, Dave, bro, this is editing 101. Now, Denny O'Neil, amazing creator in comic books in a plethora of different publishers. But he was a monster editor. As I've said before, he didn't even want to get noticed for editing. And with that, I leave the floor to you to talk about that editing perspective from his career.
Okay. I think when you talk about an editor in sort of Denny O'Neil's, like the perspective, the type of editor he would have been at, say, Marvel and DC, I think that all the best editors I've met at Marvel and DC, who have, you know, shepherded in not just talents, but like worked on some of the amazing titles, and really promote the talent as well. Most of those people end up being, like, as editors, end up being great creators in of themselves.
Yeah.
You know, not just Denny O'Neil. Like, you look at Archie Goodwin. Like, Archie Goodwin, amazing editor. You know, and I think that it's one of those things where, I think that for some, you still see it in the industry. Some people try to become an editor because they think that becoming an editor is your into eventually becoming a writer in comics. You become, because it was, there was a period where literally, half the books at Marvel were being written by other editors. So you basically went down the hall and said, "Hey, look, I want to can I write 4 issues of your book, and you can write 4 issues of the book I'm editing?" And there was a lot of that seemed to go on.
Oh, really? Back then it was that simple to kind of cross promote.
Oh, if go back and look at those books, yeah, you'll see on a lot of books the writers were actual, their names were on as editors on other titles.
And it even went so far that they said, well, don't edit my book and I won't edit your book. So basically leave all the stuff in that's controversial. And they had this agreement among each other. That was pretty great. That's why you got these very bizarre books in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of them, it was easy. It was a way for them to make extra money. And they wanted to write the comics as well as edit them. That's where they wanted to go. But with Denny, I think it was just, he like Archie was so good at what he did as a writer that when you're asking that of somebody else, you know exactly what to ask, you know exactly how to understand the process, and you know what goes into it, which all too often, there's a lot of editors who aren't creators, and they don't always necessarily understand what a creator has to go through to produce the work that's going into a comic. But go on, Chris.
I was about to say, if you compare the way Denny O'Neil edited books to these hobby editors, if you will, who were really writers, Denny O'Neil brought his journalistic background to editing. I think you can really tell.
Well, I think on the whole, we've gone through different periods where certain publishers, editorial directors have had more control and say over what goes into a book than others. There's been certain periods. I can think of the period in particular, like for Marvel, there was a period at the turn of the century where it's kind of seemed that like they were trying to push out so many books. It was just before they did their IPO, and they put out so many comics. And at one point, it was literally, if you could just hold the pencil, you could have got a run on a book that, I think
if I hold it like this, you think I get a job? I hold it back.
Hey, you could have got back then.
Calling any minute. Marvel is calling any minute.
Oh, I once looked through an artist's portfolio, and I was flicking through it, and I was trying to break it to him. I said, no, you've got quite a bit of way to go. Here's some things that you can think of, I would say. And he interrupted me to tell me that the pages I just looked through were pages he just got back from Marvel that were about to be published.
That's nice.
And I looked back at them and I went, and it was difficult. I was like, oh, really? The only thing I can suggest is you go back to them.
Are you sure you want this published?
and to this day, as far as I know, that person has never had their work published again. But it was literally like there was, I remember horror stories of good writers, they'd write their 12-issue outline. This is what I want to do with this character this year. The editor goes, that's great. Writes plots for the first 4 or 5 issues, sends them off to the artist. And, you know, the way the Marvel was working, it's like, you know, the writer gets sent to the artist's plot, pencils come back, the editor looks, checks them over, then sends copies to the writer so the writer can then dialogue it. And this wasn't the day when, you know, Jack Kirby would pretty much write an entire issue and even dialogue and
in a day.
Yeah, Stan would have to edit the dialogue that was supplied. This was a writer sending an outline in for a story, getting pencils back that don't match his story, where the artist decided, I don't think I want to draw that. I want to do this. And what was happening is the pages were coming in so late that they had no choice but to just dialogue the pencils and create a story as best they could. But now the writer's going, well, what's the artist doing on the next issue? Because if he's disregarded half my plot for this,
there's no trust.
Where's it going? Where's this going now? I no longer know where my comic's going. I've had this 1-year plan approved by you, and you've given it to an artist who you've given permission to just go ahead and draw what they want.
And disregard anything I want. Yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah. So, but I mean, again, it's like it's for an editor that works nowadays. Like if you're working as an editor for, say, I would imagine DC now is you're basically a traffic manager. So you probably, you know, you talk to the creators on a regular basis, you're making sure they deliver their work on time, but the editorial decisions are being made by group editors, publishers, and sometimes maybe an influential creator who's, you know, they want him, they don't want him to go away, and he gets a certain say over a certain character. So, you know, the editors have to run things through past creators.
So let me ask you this, right? Because in '86, O'Neil had moved over to DC as an editor, right? He became at that time the group editor for Batman titles, right?
Right.
Now we touched upon this right before the break about the death of Jason Todd. Now check out this quote from O'Neil. Let me know your thoughts. He goes, "It changed my mind about what I do for a living. Superman and Batman have been in continuous publication for over half a century and has never been true of any fictional construct before. These characters have a lot of more weight than the hero of a popular sitcom that lasts maybe 4 years. They have become post-industrial folklore, and part of this job is to be the custodian of folk figures. Everybody on Earth knows Batman and Robin." What do you think about that quote?
No, I think that's true, and it's what I find most missing now is, you know, he at that time he was very much like, hey, I want to make sure that my work keeps these characters alive, keeps these characters prominent, but keep them true to who and what they are.
Yeah, but at the same time, remember he killed off the original Batwoman. He killed off the second.
Oh, I know. But it was, as he said, it was this that, you know, there's sometimes like, often what they would do is rather than reinvent a character, they would kill them off because this was before they decided which Earth they lived on, how far. It was, well, let's kill this character off, give it several months, and then or a year, and then we can bring the character back as somebody else. You know, you could do it that way.
I mean, Batwoman's doing it now. They're killing off Ruby Rose on CW, introducing a whole new character.
They're not killing her off. That was they changed their mind, or that was never the plan. Because there was a big discussion that they're not going to kill her off.
Really? I thought they wanted to kill her.
No. The writer came out, the showrunner came out and said, no, we are not going to kill her off. And not really irked me off. If you go on her Twitter, the woman who's showrunning the Batman show, then you go on her Twitter. What does it say on her Twitter? Creator of Batwoman. Wow.
Okay.
As far as I know, Greg Rucka created Batwoman, the new Batwoman.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. No, but so all right. This is a completely separate thing. So in TV, if you're adapting, like if you go back and watch Daredevil, Power Man, Jessica Jones, you'll see that the creator of all of those is whoever was the showrunner and wrote the first episode of the show.
Yeah, but it's all but
creator of the show,
it's in the
but they
credits
they get it created by credit. So it says Daredevil and then it says created by.
Yeah, but it says they created the show.
No, it doesn't. If you go back and look, in most places it actually says created by.
I want to ask you guys this. I had gone to a Boston Comic Con several years ago, and Bob Layton was there. Okay. He was sitting next to one of my favorite creators, which is from the Comic Crusaders, who shall remain nameless for now, because he was telling me don't do it. But I had to. I shared a tweet. I took a picture of his banner and shared it. Bob Layton considers himself a creator of Iron Man. Is that a fair assessment?
A creator is absolutely perfectly fine. If you add to the lore,
I don't think so. Though. I mean, if you add to lore, you just add it to lore. But to say you created it, no, you added.
No, not the creator, but a creator. That is okay.
If you say I'm a creator, if he was to say I'm a creator of Iron Man.
Yeah, if he would have said Jim Rhodes, I would have been fine, but he didn't say that.
Well, if he says I was a creator of Iron Man, in a very sort of loosey-goosey about term, it's true. It's like he is a creator, and he worked on Iron Man.
But not a founder like that. That's how I perceive it.
Yeah, but you remember, when you're living in that time. So say like you take over writing and drawing a comic book.
Okay.
And for that period, it suddenly becomes more popular, and everyone's like, "Oh, they want to use that version of Iron Man in the Avengers. That version of Iron Man appears in all of this." And you go off and you do something else afterwards, but they're making sure that it stays true to what you did. For a while there, you're like, "Yeah, I created that part of Iron Man's history." But
absolutely,
like any Marvel character, every single creator that works on it is a creator of that.
I'm not taking that away from them, but just the verbiage sometimes makes you think that they believe that they are an OG. They're not the OG. They add on.
No, definitely not.
But you said one of the things.
A creator working on Iron Man. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, verbiage. It's the verbiage.
Perfectly fine to say in your byline, I'm the creator of the Batwoman TV show. That's perfectly fine. He's the creator of the Batwoman TV show. That's perfectly fine. But to say I'm the creator of Batwoman would imply of the character.
Exactly.
Same as Bob Layton. Bob Layton said, I'm the creator of Iron Man. Everybody would say, no, you're not.
No, but he might have been, if he designed, like I know he designed many different costumes for Iron Man. So
he did.
If he's got that Iron Man on if he's got a particular Iron Man on his banner and he says, I'm the creator of that Iron Man.
Definitely, that's okay.
That was the whole issue. It wasn't like that. And that's why I kind of felt the type of way and felt like, wow, you're disrespecting the OGs, man. I mean, I know you contributed too. But
yeah, I mean, this is
change the verbiage a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do like to a certain extent that they don't always get it right, but at the end of the move is Marvel does tend to credit, and DC as well, credits most of the creators that have had a say, move the needle on those characters.
I mean, Bill Finger didn't get credit until like a few years ago. You know what I mean? Because Athena kept fighting for that.
Yeah, but we were talking about Frank Miller. The idea that Matt Murdock is a Catholic, that comes from Frank Miller, and he's very proud that he added that to the Daredevil mythos. Yeah. But I think Frank Miller would never claim that he was the creator of Daredevil. He would never say that.
No, it's like saying Groot. Groot was introduced in comics many years ago, right? I mean, in a horror story. But then a Puerto Rican creator took it over and said, hey, Groot, the way they designed it reminds me of a tree that only grows in Puerto Rico. So in essence, they're trying to say the alien Groot is Puerto Rican, based on the design of how the tree looks. So it's hilarious. It's so funny how creators come about, after the fact, add on to a mytho, but want to feel like, we create. No, you didn't create. You added on. That's all I want to say. I'm not trying to discredit anyone, but I just hate the word when you say you created. No, you didn't. You added on to the mytho, but you didn't create. Don't do that. I think that's a total disrespect to the original creator. Just me. You know what I mean? Feel free to comment, everybody, if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
But we have a little plug for an upcoming episode of I.C.C. because we are going to talk about the creative process, what goes into creating the character. This is coming up soon.
Finally, I.C.C. will try to fight right there. I'm a fight about certain things, with creation or add-ons. And if I hear something wrong, I'm gonna point that out to you. Not that I know it's wrong, but
I think you'll be on point for most of what we're talking about.
Because here's a little preview, because we all know the first issue Wolverine appeared in, and it was drawn by Herb Trimpe. But John Romita did the original art design of Wolverine. So who created Wolverine? That's going to be an interesting question.
It is. I mean, I found something, similar where a friend of mine and I were talking about, in regards to a Wolverine character, as to who created it, because and even on a first appearance scale, if you want to get into collectibles, I'm like 180 is the first appearance, not 181 of Hulk. I'm sorry, you got a full splash panel, you see him, that's first appearance, you're done. But that's another topic over there. But we're talking about editing, right? And then O'Neil's editing, right? So over here, he joined Marvel's editorial staff in the 80s, right? He edited Daredevil during Frank Miller's run as both writer-artist, right? He fired Roger McKenzie so that, like as I mentioned earlier, Miller could do both writer and pencil, which they said is so rare in the industry. You know what I mean? And Jim Shooter says that that's what saved Daredevil from cancellation. So basically, had Denny O'Neil not done that, I don't think we would even gotten a Daredevil TV show.
And you consider who showed up in the first issue Miller wrote, Elektra, and that completely changed the game.
It changed the whole game. Elektra became our own series, our own, very applauded miniseries, if you will, of movies. I would want to see a franchise of her. She got added into the Daredevil show, pretty deeply as well. I mean, imagine none of that would have happened had he not just taken that chance to say, I respect this guy to be able to do both.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
No, the stick, the hand, all of that. It's. I would say that not as. I think Scott Snyder tried to do something similar with Batman, introducing the Talon and the Court of Owls.
I mean, Scott Snyder is a hell of a creator, though. I mean, he's one of these ill creators from right now that I hope people please just support his ass. He is so out there. I love his mindset and expanding mythos and adding to it instead of using tired old stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I stuck with of all the New 52 books, and technically speaking, his Batman wasn't really a New 52. It was one of the two titles that kind of still carried over from what he and Greg were already working on it.
Yeah.
So it kind of that carried on. They just changed the numbering, and just the same way they did with Green Lantern.
I mean, even that first Batman issue in the renumbering. Do you know that it sells for upwards of $100 right now? In the
wow, amazing!
It does. So if you find a $1 box, you better pick it up quick.
But I will also say he did great work on Detective Comics when he worked with Jock and Francisco Francavilla.
Oh, that was
the Black Mirror storyline. That was a great storyline.
Listen, I collected that in floppy format, and I had to get that in a graphic novel because that was
very good. It's a very good run.
Sorry, in what format did you just say?
Graphic novel.
No, you said.
I put it. I'm sorry. I know you don't like the F word.
Periodicals.
Let me use the P word.
Brian Hibbs might be watching this, so just in case.
Brian, I'm sorry. I said floppy. I mean,
yeah.
I'm so sorry.
The pamphlets.
But
but see, catching me there. I gotta stop using the F word. That,
but I think but I think what you had at DC is, and you've always had, is a lot of the decisions, creative decisions, have been sort of with editorial. They may have brought artists in, creators in, build on and if someone's got a great idea, they might go, wow, that's something we can spread across other books, relate to other books. That's such a good idea. But most of the key decisions would take place in-house. And even if you've had your 12-issue run approved and you're 4 issues in, and somebody else somewhere wants to do something with one of the characters you plan to use, you can find your series being upended by them saying, like, do you know what? This isn't fleshing out the way we wanted. Take us in another direction, or cut it off, cut it in 6 issues instead of 12. This happens a lot, things like that.
So, in your personal experience as a creator in the field of comics, have you gone through that from that side?
Oh, I've seen very much. I mean, I was working as an art agent during the New 52, and there was one of the books I was involved in where the issue was completely finished. We were working on the 3rd issue of the title, and the book was literally going to be printed the following day, and we suddenly got a note that one of the publishers, there was 3 at the time, had decided that some of the pages needed to be redrawn.
Wow! So one out of 3 decided that, and you had to make changes.
Yeah, so we actually made changes to 5 or 6 pages of the comic, and literally overnight.
I mean, I've heard those horror stories. My good friend that I actually chatted with yesterday on the Stay at Home Con from the Netherlands, Ian Nichols. He's gone through that, and his experience he's a new creator. He's an up and coming rising star, right? But when we met at San Diego, for example, he's working on a book that, unfortunately, while he's at the show, they told him, you got to change these pages around. So the poor guy, instead of enjoying San Diego after party life, my man was stuck in a hotel redoing pages.
Oh, yeah.
Or going to the show the next day. I mean, Dave, you're a creator. Have you ever had those type of experiences? Like you're at a show and they're telling you, here, this is not, you got to change a few things. How do you feel about that?
Oh, particularly when you're working with smaller publishers, and I'll be at a convention, and at the same time I'm having to go back to my room to edit a script, check artwork, deal with the printer, and then you still have to try and do some of the social events because you're expected to do some of them. You have meetings set up to do at some party or something, and then you've got to go back to your room, work for a couple of hours before going back to sleep, and then having to be up at 6 in the morning to be at the convention again. I've been through conventions where, fortunately, when I was younger, where I literally got about 15 hours sleep for the entire week.
Oh, wow. I've been there, bro. I think when I went to San Diego, if I got a total of 8 hours sleep throughout that 4-day weekend I was there, that was a lot.
Yeah. But you've always, whether it's the publisher making a decision, whether everyone's just, maybe it's something as simple as everybody's just missed one thing. Like the writer missed it, the editor missed it, the artist missed it.
And it happens. I mean, as Comic Crusaders, I get comic books, and when I send them over to my team to review, I mean, a shout out to my boy Johnny the Machine Hughes. He catches so many mistakes. He goes and he emails them directly. Hey guys, I don't think you want to print this yet. You know what I mean?
There's been word balloons missing,
pages out of place.
Yeah, I mean, there was someone had posted my friend Nevs had posted there was a graphic novel that was printed, and one word balloon wasn't printed. So rather than reprint the book, they printed that word balloon on a sticker and sent it out to every retailer. So you could just peel it off and stick it on the comic.
No, and no. I'm not doing extra work to read my comic book.
Yeah.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there was, I think one of the all-time classics was when they reprinted, Marvel did this beautiful box set of all Simon and Kirby's early Captain Americas.
Oh,
and some guy had gone in and done some little drawings that weren't originally there. Some very rude things that actually made it through into the final set. Like it printed. It printed, yeah.
We're talking about editing here today. So what do editors need to be weary of here? Because this is insane. People being able to sneak things in. I mean, have you edited books before? First of all, so people know.
Oh yeah. No, I've edited loads of books, lots of different companies. So part of editing is learning what the house style is.
Okay.
If most of my history has been working with artists and creators where I'm helping them tell their story, or at least if it's for characters that they don't own, I've tried to give them as much freedom as possible. Because I think that's what you get. You get something better.
Absolutely, I agree. Thank you for doing that. For me, you're a forward thinker. Allow them a little bit of freedom in order to express, that right characterization, at least how they see it. I mean, you never know if it's something that could hit and resonate with people.
Right. Well, it was. I'll give you a great example. When I founded Radical Studios, Radical Publishing, one of the first books we put out was Hercules, and when the decision was made, like when we first decided that we were going to do that, do a version of Hercules, my partners originally they went round basically just knocking on the door of creators that had sold a project that had gone to a movie.
Okay.
And thank God, each of those creators turned around and said, "I've got no interest in Hercules. Like, why are you sending me a Hercules? Why are you asking me to write Hercules? I don't do that," type of thing. And so once I'd got my partners to understand, like, look, I want to go to someone who will do a fantastic job. You won't have heard of them, or very likely haven't heard of them, but they will do a fantastic job. They will do exactly what we're looking for. And so even though he's well known, he was well known, he's passed now, but his name is Steve Moore. And so, he's not, he could be prolific, but he wasn't on anybody's go-to lists. I think generally he might be considered a difficult creator in that doesn't want to write crap. So if you give him like, hey, want to write 6 issues of Spider-Man, he would go, absolutely not. I'm no interested in Spider-Man, and so why would I write that?
I love that though. You got to be real about that stuff. Listen, if you can't show forth your passion in anything, I mean, it's not going to work, man.
Yeah.
It isn't.
So Steve was someone who I knew he's written books on history. There was a joke that he made to me once, which was, if you call me, he said, go to the British Museum, call me while I'm sitting at home, and I can give you a tour of it.
Wow.
He knew it.
Really?
He knew it that well. Yeah, he knew it that well.
God forbid he had his GPS. All right, Dave, turn left over here.
So I knew that he would do something that would be, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to do a Hercules that was actually set in the same time period that the original myths were originally conceived.
Not that DC Hercules from the future, right?
No, it's very much a Bronze Age. And so what Steve did was he basically gave us almost a Magnificent Seven style, like gave Hercules a great ensemble cast, but which he pulled not only from mythology but from historic, from history. So we had a mixture of characters that were both mythological and true, real characters from that time period, and he did a great job of mixing it. We saw there was no physical. We never saw Zeus. We never saw the gods in it, other than flashbacks. So it was, literally I think the only thing I'd really said to Steve was just, I said we didn't want to do a sort of a sword and sandals version of Hercules, and I just was looking for, don't treat Hercules as though you were Jesus, like it was in a Bible. Like, anyone doing a version of Jesus would never have like Jesus looking up into the sky and talking to an old white guy with a big white beard going, "Hi, Dad. Hey," treat Hercules the same way. But I was basically going for someone who I knew would be passionate about the project, get it right, nail it, and we'd have a much better story. And we did, and it was probably why it was the very first project we sold as a feature film.
So I want to ask you something, Dave, just because of your editing experience. And this is about editing. What do you think is one of the most difficult tasks in editing? Somebody else's work.
It depends on what the job is. Like if I was working for, if it was say DC, and I've got lots of different plates I'm spinning. I'd probably be editing 3 or 4 books, but I'd also have if I'm editing one of the Batman books, I'm still going to have to work with the group editor on Batman and the publisher of Batman, because I don't want to do it. I'm going to have to be careful to make sure the writer of the book doesn't do anything that's out of sync with anything else that's planned. There was probably more freedom in the past, but now everything seems very much part of the same channels. So I don't want to do anything with my book.
So do you feel that editorial now is very like a micromanaging type of thing?
Yeah, I think because when you've got, obviously DC can't sell much if it doesn't have Batman in it. Well, it's a fact, really. I mean, so Batman's in everything. So
Batman is the Wolverine of Marvel up until I mean the craziness kind of ended now. I don't know who's the big person at Marvel.
Well, you went through a phase of Harley Quinn was in every.
And DC, oh my God,
DC book.
Oh yeah.
And still kind of, but she does have a kick-ass TV show. Let's get real.
Oh yeah,
that show is really good. That show is amazing, actually.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're gonna get Doom Patrol season 2 coming, so I can't wait for that.
But your job as an editor at DC is to basically just keep that pipeline going. Like, make sure you don't upset the apple cart at all. Don't do anything that's going to contradict something that's in somebody else's Batman book that month.
So would you say that's the most hardest part of the job, being able to kind of, put all the titles together and make sure that no one is stepping on each other's toes?
I would say it's soul destroying, to be honest. I was offered that job at Marvel once, and it was just I have no interest in that. You have to be interested in those characters. You've got to be vested in them to want to see them continue on. But again, at the same time, your version of what those characters, you might have grown up and you've got this great, I'm an editor at DC now. I love Batman. I love these characters. And yet your group editor and maybe your publisher don't agree with their decisions, but you've got to lump it. All of a sudden now I'm one of the editors on a Batman book, doing a book that editing the stories I don't really like, or I wouldn't really do if I had my say. So that's, you know, I mean, you know,
how much power do you have as an editor for a bigger company? I mean, when it comes to that, do you have sufficient power to make things happen, or are you really limited by the corporation?
You're limited by the corporation. I think what we've lost over the years is everything's, as now that Marvel's owned by Disney are very much in control. So it's led, so even, you know, even the editor
owns DC, so they're really pushing a digital platform, because they tell you.
Well, it's basically everything always goes downwards. So it's always somebody up at the top is saying, well, like, and I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, because I know Kevin Feige's having much more control at Marvel now over publishing.
Okay.
So it's probably, here's the characters I'm going to be using in the upcoming Marvel movies. Here's how the directions they're going to be going in. I'm not going to give you too much, but idea of what they're going, but I want you to shift these characters in these directions.
And I hate that, man. It should be the other way around, period.
Well,
but I know we're never going to get, you know, I'm going to say comics to movies.
The comics should be their own thing. The film should be their own thing.
But if you're going to make them their own thing, they just do that very firm separation and don't kind of, how is it? Exacerbate our expectations. You know what I mean? We expect so much, and then sometimes we left flabbergasted, like, it wasn't that great. I mean, in the case of DC, like you said, Marvel earlier, yeah, they kick ass in their movies, but DC always leaves me just a tad disappointed, with the exception of Wonder Woman, what I thought was a great film.
Yeah, but also, I think what also makes the job as an editor, I imagine, very hard is all these crossovers they push into these storylines.
Absolutely,
that's absolutely annoying. I mean,
you do occasionally have certain creators who are big enough, who, when they take over a book, they go, okay, well, look, if you've got any crossovers planned this year, I don't want anything to do with it. Like, this is where my book's going. So
you're telling me, as an editor, if you say, okay, the company planned this, you know, company-wide crossover, but they actually allow certain creators to say, not on my book, you're not.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but on certain, like, if you've got a character that's very much a standalone, that's not part of, like, doesn't really mix much with the other characters, they might, well, I mean, that character may still turn up. The character may still turn up in the crossover, but it won't be reflected in that character's title.
So it won't be a canon thing for the character.
Well, probably as far as the writers' creative team is concerned, at least for while they're on the book, that story, like, they're not even thinking about it.
I would imagine Grant Morrison has that kind of power on Green Lantern. I think he can keep this Green Lantern run the way he wants to keep it.
Yeah, for as long as he wants to keep it.
When I saw Grant Morrison or Jeff Johns, I know that definitely will have sway over the whatever books they're on.
Yeah. And again, if it's not a major character, you might, even if you're a lesser known creator, you might still be able to get that, because they're probably not concerned whether your character turns up in this series or not.
You know,
or you go with the flow, like Ed Brubaker incorporated all these crossovers into his Captain America run. Even Civil War, when he had Captain America get killed at the end, he incorporated that into his run to great effect, actually.
Yeah, into his run, exactly. I mean, that was one of my most disappointing things. Civil War, the miniseries itself, didn't have an end. It ended in a book, you know, that wasn't even related to the initial run of the story, which kind of broke my heart. Like, damn it, you're gonna kill Captain America, but you're gonna do it outside of the main miniseries you created. I mean,
where do those
editorial decisions come from?
But I think that was probably a decision that was already in play. I'm pretty sure that Ed Brubaker had probably already planned that and said, right, okay, I'm going to kill the character off, and this is what's going to happen. And
because he was building with his Bucky towards Bucky taking over from the first issue.
Right, so they tied that into Civil War.
They almost made me think, it's Puerto Rican Bucky, because his costume looked like the Puerto Rican flag. Like, come on, bro. Are you Boricua? What's going on here?
Amazing. Yeah, maybe he is. We don't know.
Yeah, but I think as well as if you're an editor for those companies, it's difficult to do something new now. I think what we've all seen, like diminishing sales on the periodicals anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, right now too, with the COVID, it doesn't help the situation. And you see what DC is doing, kind of going on a more digital format. I mean, coming from my perspective as the owner of Comic Crusaders, you know what I mean, we were getting review copies that kind of ended now because they're doing this very digital platform. You know what I mean? Not through a fault of our own, because unlike other websites, we don't spoil stuff. We're not that type of crew. But we're being, held back on reviewing those books because they're no longer giving us the access. Marvel still is, for example. So DC stepped up the game, guys, because the less access you allow us, the less I'm able to review.
Right.
We can't buy all your books. I mean, not every book is good. Let's get real here. I'm not trying to be an asshole about it, but it's just the truth of the matter. You know what I mean?
Right. So tell me, if you had if you could go back to when I first got to buying comics, there was no previews, there was no website to spoil what was happening. Everything was you found out what was happening in the comic
when you bought it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to go back to those days. I mean, again, we don't spoil, unlike other sites, especially a site in the UK that's a good friend of yours. That loves to spoil shit when I wake up in the morning because they're 5 hours ahead.
We welcome them as guests on our program.
Oh, no, absolutely. I love those guys. You know what I mean? I follow them early on. I'm not gonna deny that shit. You know what I mean? They're an inspiration to what I'm doing. So thank you for that. You know what I mean?
We'll ask Rich to come on one day and
hey man, if it wasn't for Rich, people wouldn't know who the fuck Comic Crusaders are, because he tried to start some shit with me. Thank you, Rich. I'm on your ass, brother.
Rich, come on to our program.
Yeah, no, I would love to have Rich on though, just to talk, shop, because he is a very smart individual. He's been in the business for a minute, and he has some real opinions, and they've been in some stuff. You know what I mean? So I would love to pick his brain, bro. Just honestly, for me, there is no competition. We all do things differently. You know what I mean? It's all love. We're all supporting one platform that we love, which is comic books. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and and let's just keep spreading the love in our own ways, and that's that. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna hate you for doing it your way. I'm not spoilerish. You just want to be spoilerish. That's all right. All love. I love you guys anyway, but you know what I mean? Listen, I love every single comic book website, because before Comic Crusader was formed, I was visiting everything. You know what I mean? And my wife is the one that helped inspire what it is now, and allow me to meet awesome individuals like yourselves, so we could chat about legends like Denny O'Neil and the industry in of itself. And Dave, I mean, you've been a hell of an editor yourself, so we're almost approaching 2 hours here. So what I want to ask you then, coming from a perspective as an editor, what do you think are the best steps for a person that's seeking to be in this field, the editorial field of comic books? What should they know? What should they have a good grasp on?
Well, if they're, depends where they want to get in. If they want to get in as a writer, you have to write. If artist, you've got to be able to draw, and you've got to keep drawing. And it used to be there was a period when, as a creator, you could take your portfolio to Marvel and DC, and if they saw that you had promise, they might even give you like a short story, a one shot, a fill-in issue, and the editor would work with you. So it might take you like several months to do it, because they'd be going back and forth. They get you to redraw stuff. So it would be a very hands-on, almost training. But they would often do that, which I see no evidence of happening at the moment. Everything is pretty much, if you've got to go out, you've got to find your own work, or you've got to create a platform for yourself. You've got to, if you're a writer, find an artist, do that first comic together, sell it at a convention, sell it digitally. You know, even
I
if
have a
it's
final question for you, Dave. This is the last, this is the last question, but again, just based on time. I mean, when you came on as a creator, what was your experience as a creator with your first editor?
Well, the first job I had as an editor was working for a British reprint company. So it was really kind of resizing artwork, repackaging artwork, for, to be printed. It was only after that that I pushed my artwork more and started to get work at Marvel as an inker. So I did a lot of work. You've got to thank people like Richard Starkings for that.
Rich Starkings, yeah, definitely Elephant Man and all that. He's definitely
but at the time he was the editor-in-chief for Marvel UK.
Wow, let's check that out.
Yeah,
interesting.
So he was.
So when are we gonna have Rich on I.C.C. to talk to him about that? How many Riches do you know, bro? I know a lot of Daves. You know a lot of Riches. Come on, what's going on?
I just know a couple of Riches. I know a lot more Daves than I know Riches.
What is it with the Daves? My God, when I talked to my wife, Dave said this. He goes, "Which one?" I got South Dave, West Coast Dave, East Coast Dave. Overseas Dave. Oh my God.
There is definitely a legion of Daves out there.
Yeah, I love this conversation, guys. So just again, coming from your editorial perspective and any future editors, Dave, what do you suggest to them to really keep, in order to enable that craft of being an editor? Because again, it's a craft. You got to be able to do things right, not to hurt your creative team, but also supply the best product to the consumer. What are the best steps you think to take when you're an editor and trying to, edit this content to go out to the public?
Well, I think you've got you've got a balance to achieve. Like, so let's just, if I'm say the editor of Batman, but first off, you have to find out where the company's going with Batman right now, like what direction, how is he being treated. So, but you've got to make sure that, you respect everything that's come before, you respect the character, you respect the creators you're working with. And then you want to be able to do everything in your power to tell the best possible stories with the creators you're working with and empower them to tell their best stories. Don't, let them, wherever possible, work to their strengths. If you see certain things in that, if you bring in on what could be a fairly new artist and you've looked through their portfolio and they're great at ninjas and martial arts stuff, then go to the writer and say, hey, look, he's great with this material. Can you give us a story, or at least where we can rely on this and tell stuff that would, because that will showcase that if the artist is drawing something that he's really engaged in, it will look great. It'll look better. It's going to be his best work. Same for the writer. It's going to be their best work if it's something they really enjoy doing.
Absolutely.
And when artists and writers are doing stuff that they really enjoy, it does seem to transfer over to the people that are reading the material. It's you can feel it. You can feel that they really enjoy what they're doing.
I agree.
So I would just say,
I'm trying to set up our outro over here, and it wants to play.
So I would just say, your job is, it's not about what you want. It's about what you think is best for the character. Obviously, you have to think of what's best for the company, which, sometimes that might be difficult because what you think is best for the character, the company might not agree with you on, or the creators you're working with might not agree with you on it. So it's, be an ambassador. You've got to learn to listen, empathy. Sometimes you might be given a creative team that you might not even want to work with, but your publisher has said, these are the guys that are going to be doing this book. And your job is still to make sure that you're supporting them as best you can.
So let's do this.
So I see we have to go because Al needs to pee. Apparently.
Yeah, bro, I'm blowing up over here, guys, bro. I'm blowing up like a motherfucker. But not even just that. We've been here for an hour and 40 minutes, but I love it. I mean, this is about Denny O'Neil, about being an editor, about the contributions of Denny, all the stuff. I mean, we didn't even get into the question. You know what I mean? I mean, with Dennis comment, because I saw Dennis's tweet. That man was so heartbroken, man, with the loss of Denny. And it broke my heart reading his tweets. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I mean, my man
Brian Stelfreeze did a really nice write-up for him as well.
I want you guys to talk about that right now, just for a sec. I'll be right back.
Well,
take it over.
Yeah, no, I think that go out, like, check out Brian Stelfreeze, Bill Sienkiewicz, the artwork in the promotional piece you saw at the beginning of this, which we've been tweeting around, was a piece by Bill Sienkiewicz drew of Denny O'Neil. Some people speak in pictures rather than words when it comes to expressing how they feel about someone who's passed.
Yeah.
But
I hope we got a little bit the idea across to maybe younger people who are discovering comics now. Go back to the old stuff and rediscover an amazing voice in comics, Denny O'Neil, because everybody knows Stan Lee. And I remember when Stan Lee unfortunately passed, I believe that was last year or the year before, there was a lot of people who said, 2 years ago, a lot of people who said, I remember Stan, and Stan touched me in certain ways, and Stan definitely touched a lot of comic fans in a way with these early Fantastic Four stories. I can say that about myself. But Denny O'Neil had a huge part of my childhood when he worked on Batman, on Green Lantern, and go back to these. If you're a new comic book reader, go back to these old stories. Yes, they feel a little bit dated, but go back and discover amazing comic book stories.
Not even dated though, because if you go back to those heroin stories, we're still dealing with those problems today. So you know what? Yeah. You will connect on a certain level with that type of stuff because it's real.
If you are into creators who want to be a voice of change, who want to tell you about the problems that are ailing us even to this day, and especially what's going on in America at the moment and across the world. Denny O'Neil wrote about these topics in the 60s, and unfortunately, not many things have changed as we discover these days, but you can discover an original writer with an original voice, and he was an amazing writer.
I can imagine if Denny O'Neil, was doing this now as a young man with the advent of social media, he would have probably been attacked so much.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But this was the man that was thinking on the forefront about real inclusion in comics. So, again, many people may not know this, but please look into it. Don't label everybody. There are certain people outside of our own skin color that really understood what was happening and try to bring that to the forefront to help us, express our message.
Everybody's talking about Miles Morales, rightfully so. Bendis' co-creation, Miles Morales, and how he's the face of Spider-Man to a new generation.
Yes, he is.
If you go back to kids who grew up with the Justice League Unlimited series, John Stewart is the Green Lantern of the generation.
Green Lantern to them, absolutely.
And Denny O'Neil co-created that character together with Neil Adams.
Yes, he did. I mean, listen, there were so many powerful creators that actually brought, minorities to the forefront. Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, with the art, Jack Kirby tried to do that. I mean, Dwayne McDuffie, which is, he has an award show coming out this year. I know he passed, but his wife, actually his widow, has sent me information about this that I shared on Comic Crusaders. I mean, he was an amazing creator.
Yeah.
We gotta celebrate all these people that brought this change because it's reflective of our real world.
And if you want to check out, I mean, if those who follow this, there was an AMC show called I don't know what the exact title is, but it's on YouTube. It's I'm blanking out on the name. Who created The Walking Dead? Well, it's Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman. They used Robert Kirkman's name, and he was Robert Kirkman talking about comics. Robert Kirkman is more or less only.
Yeah, there was like a history of comics episode. Yeah,
and they did an episode on the Milestone, on the Milestone books. And what you have all the original characters around who are still alive, and they talk about this period of time. And you can also learn how DC worked with them and then worked against them. You can hear it from their own words. You can hear it from Janet Kahn, how they got into trouble with each other, and you learn about how editorial influenced those books, how these creators got sent to DC at a certain point in time, and you can all learn about these black artists.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Listen, when it came to Milestone, they definitely did make a lot of change and brought things to the forefront that weren't discussed before in comics. Minorities. They had their first trans hero.
Static Shock came out of this.
You know what I mean?
Came out of this.
Yeah.
And he was a successful animated character.
I mean,
very successful animated cartoon. You know what I mean?
It's kind of shocking in a way that there's like DC aren't promoting a static character right now.
Thank you. And from what I understand from Christopher Priest, when I met him, that was at Rhode Island Comic Con. I had the opportunity to chat with him. Christopher Priest definitely mentioned how, the only issue that's holding back any re-release of any Milestone books is contractual. It's paperwork. Right. But I mean, we need this more than ever. You have original characters that people are clamoring for that actually exist, because only sometimes, there's that stupid group out there that I can't agree with because of how they attack people. But sometimes I could get their point where, stop changing characters just to change them and just to try to be socially right when you do have characters that pre-exist.
Definitely.
Be pushing.
Well, not only that.
Static Shock back in the New 52, actually.
Yeah, I mean, but why not? Like, Static Shock could have been just as easily in the Justice League in place of Cyborg.
I would rather have had him in the Justice League as opposed to Cyborg, to be honest.
Cyborg, I still always think of as Teen Titans. Like,
he is a Teen Titan. He's not a JLA member, but to bring in a Static Shock would have definitely been much more powerful of a statement on behalf of DC in regards to, aligning more of the Milestone universe or the Codeverse, as they called it then, into the proper DCU.
Have they ever reprinted those original Milestone books? Have they ever been reprinted?
Well, I don't know about the reprints, but I do know I have them all in digital. Every single issue. I have every major first appearance in print in a periodical format. You probably I use periodical.
Well, are they all on Comixology? So
I believe they are. I think you could find a lot of the Milestone stuff on Comics. Go back to that. And people, the only way we're going to get this is if you guys actually push it and tell DC to stop the bullshit. Here we have original characters, POC, and even more that you could push that don't take away from any other character or rebranding or whatever it is that they do nowadays, which I feel sometimes offended about. Just because it shouldn't happen that way. We have our own. Let's be our own individuals as opposed to taking over mantles. If I'm being controversial, go ahead and comment. I really don't care at this point. I'm just stating my opinions on how I feel about that. I want to see more originality, not takeover.
Yeah, I mean I wonder if
Slippery slope.
No, I wonder if Static's a character that could turn up in Black Lightning, and then
he should. I would love that to see a live action version on that program. That would put many people on notice.
And then he could spin off into his own show, maybe.
Absolutely. Listen, you spin that off to that Codeverse, and we start getting some hardware, some Icon, some Blood Syndicate, and then more. Why not, yo?
Yeah, absolutely.
Bring it on. I'm ready for it. I think the world is ready for that.
Definitely.
This has been an awesome show, guys. Yo. You've dropped some knowledge and stuff, and I love it.
Yeah. Maybe they should but again, it's like, yes, they could reach back, they could use those characters again, or they could just create some new ones again now. Like
absolutely. Just something new. I know you creators out there being very iffy about creating anything for a bigger corporation. But step outside the ego just a little bit. That we need this as a whole. Because unfortunately, not everybody's an independent fan. And when they look at comics, it's always DC, Marvel that stands out in front of people's eyes. So go ahead and create something new and original and fresh for us. Don't be afraid to do that. And I mean, I'm pretty sure, based on the current climate, you could get a better deal for an original creation amongst those two brands.
Yeah, or even, if Marvel and DC was to just, like bend a little bit about?
It's a little.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I want this. I want this for all of us. You know what I mean? For all of us. You know what I mean? Real equality and seeing new stuff created and have the creators get properly compensated for what they do, which is key. Because these creators are out there doing all this awesome stuff, and many of them are not getting compensated properly for the creations they've made. You know, doing that old school Rob Liefeld, Stan Lee, where well, I'm standing behind you, even though you're doing all the work, but that's ours, right? You know, I'll never forget that video, Stan. May you rest in peace. But that kind of showed me how business is in the comic books. Like, just because he's standing next to you as you create something, he can claim part ownership, which is kind of insane.
It was a joke, I think.
Well, we're gonna talk about that in a future 101 about
in the next one. But we're also talking about image in our next I.C.C.
I can't wait for that.
Image.
I can't wait for that. You know, I cannot wait for that. Dave, you know, I'm definitely gonna share with you some of that image documentary, which is amazing. If you guys haven't watched it, please check it out. It's very interesting. I lived that era. Well, I mean, I was there year one at the Penn Plaza Hotel when those creators broke off from Marvel, and they did that year one. So I met Liefeld, Lee, McFarlane, all in person at year one of Image.
Wow.
Yeah, good. my friend, you know, we're shiesty people from Brooklyn. So I don't know how he did it, but he caught a line of over 300 people where we got to meet these guys within 10 minutes of us just popping up online. We just screw everybody, just come over here. He was a big man too, so nobody wanted to tell him, yo, what are you doing, you know? It's comic geeks. They didn't have balls back then. I'm just being truthful. In the 90s, a lot of us were very quiet and, you know, some of us, not all of us, not me anyway, and him. But yeah, it was awesome. You know, this has been a great conversation. First off, again, Dennis O'Neil, thank you. Thank you for the amazing creations, your contributions to the comics. I know you can't hear this, but to his family, our condolences, heartfelt. It was a very big part of our childhood, our adulthood, and even continuing when we continue to discover all the amazing things he's been a part of. Thank you. Like, again, he named one of my favorite characters, Optimus Prime. I mean, geez, bro. Dennis, on top of creating Jon Stewart, you know, changing Batwoman, the death of Rob, and everything he was involved with. I mean, you know, giving Frank Miller his first art on a Batman story. That was because of Dennis. We wouldn't have that Batman story without Mr. O'Neil. Remember that, folks. So with that, Almega, Dave Elliott, Chris Buse, please tune in next time. As we said, we're going to cover some image stuff. We're going to cover that image revolution. I can't wait because I was wholeheartedly part of that bad boy.
And don't forget, read Chris's articles on Comic Crusaders website. He's been really digging through a lot of DC history and those articles as well. Yeah,
it's some crazy deep history.
Too kind. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's very fun. A lot of fun. And if you want to check it out, I'm working on the Green Lantern series. Look at the part 3 and 4, which cover the Denny O'Neil universe, or go to my Batman columns, which also cover the Batman run with Neil Adams. So
a lot of interesting stuff. If you really want to learn, if you want to do a Comics 101 on some real shit, you got to hit Chris Buse's column on ComicCrusaders.com. He has his own section because he is that deep. So you got to take at least a half hour of your life, sit down in front of a computer, grab your favorite drink, your favorite smoke, whatever it is that is your vice, and sit down and get educated. This is, because Chris, bro, thank you so much for taking that time to research and really get so in depth in regards to comic book history. I really foresee you doing Comic Crusaders College 101 on comic books.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're literally creating the Comics Crusaders Wikipedia there, mate.
Yeah, man, he is, yeah, absolutely.
But I have to thank Elf, because what I talked about Frank Miller, he is giving me the freedom. I can write whatever I want, the lengths I want. So come on to Comics Crusaders. We are a happy family here.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, this is all about freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion. That's what Comics Crusaders is, you know what I mean? Let's talk. We're not political, but we are. When it comes to comics, we're going to talk comics. You know what I mean? So again, make sure to check out comiccrusader.com, undercovercapes.com. Look at the bottom. Follow us, the International Comics Collective, on Twitter at I.C.C. on UCPN, or on Facebook at International Comics Collective. Or you can even follow us on our firmly branded website, which is only ours, which is the Comic Book Industry Podcast. So make sure to check us out there as well. If I could actually find that link, there you go. Comic Book Industry Podcast. You see, as it is. So check us out there.
Hit us up with your questions on social media if you want to.
Yeah, please ask away, folks. Ask questions. If you have even ideas of topics you maybe want us to cover. When it comes to comic book history, your favorite creators, your favorite editors, your favorite writer, your favorite artist, whomever, your favorite label even.
Yeah.
Old school, new school. Bring it on, yo. We'll do our homework and we'll get into a nice little discussion about that.
Yeah, and even while we're on air, just messaging, like send a tweet at us, and we'll talking about it straight away.
Absolutely, yo. We'll definitely mention it. So thanks for everybody that's been watching, listening, tuning in. Yo, many blessings, much love. Thank you. Almega, Dave, and Chris. I.C.C. on UCPN. Wepa! And we're out.
Stay safe.
Thanks
Stay
for
safe.
tuning in, folks. I just want to move the guys. I want to do my outro real quick. Actually, not. This is what we're going to do right here. Check this out. Look at this amazing picture created by the one and only Dave Elliott. And with that, everybody, we are out. Thank you for listening.